Okay, picking up with part two of our conversation with Steve Zimmerman, nonprofit management consultant uh, out of the Spectrum Nonprofit Services Group in Milwaukee. So he's a cheesehead by choice. I don't, I assume you're Miller Lite or whatever they drink in Los Angeles, but you don't have to answer that. Let's just allow us to assume that. But all right, so what is what you have written about as the sustainability mindset?
Sure. I mean, I think the sustainability mindset is, I really view it as two things. One, it's about it being a journey, right? We often talk about sustainability as if it's a destination and, hopefully we can be sustainable and money just pours in. That doesn't happen in the for-profit sector. It doesn't happen in the nonprofit sector. So one is, the first part of it, I think, is always thinking of it as an orientation, not a destination. And that, keeping that at the front of your mind. And the second part of it is that really there's a tension between accomplishing your mission and being financially viable. And we have a tendency in our organizations to really silo those conversations and not talk about them. And instead, I think the sustainability mindset is about embracing that interconnectedness and understanding and, trying to bring others along and understanding that every single decision we make affects both of those. And therefore, let's look at them together instead of pulling them apart.
Just for fun, what in your experience is who's the bigger problem, the program people or the development people? I'll let that question stand.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I'll be honest. I am I'm an accountant by training, so I'm a CPA by training, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the challenge, and we just saw it in the pandemic. Look, you can run an organization with a poor program. You can't really, it's hard to run an organization with no finances. So as a result, when push comes to shove, the finance tends to take over. And I will tell you, as somebody who was a CFO in a nonprofit where I didn't understand the programs, that's not a great model for impact.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a nonprofit with which I think we're both familiar, where there was I'm going to call him a money guy, who said constantly, no margin, no mission.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just another way of pointing out the tension. Should the CEO of a nonprofit that's either well-funded or not see him or herself, themselves as a program person and I know it's going to be both, but primarily a program person or a development person?
I would say primarily a program person. I was up last week working with an organization doing a financial training that actually talks, their suicide prevention organization. I think it is much harder for me to learn how to talk people literally off the edge than it is for me to teach them how to understand finances.
Yeah. Does the nature of this challenge, opportunity we're talking about differ across the spectrum of types of nonprofit clients? And I'm really sort of more familiar with policy-oriented or advocacy groups where I can see it taking a particular form, a different research output, if even only in terms of subject as opposed to proposed solution or something like that. But is it the same for arts groups and social service providers, or more similar or dissimilar?
So I would argue it's probably the same. I think the biggest difference for me is how do you measure or define impact, right? It is much easier to do that from a social service perspective than it is from arts or policy-oriented groups. And so how do you really understand how your programs are working? How do you evaluate that and then be able to fund off of that?
Yeah. Yeah. Like what an arts group would say, well, we're trying to change the culture or something like that. I mean, right. I'm just trying to come up with examples. By the way, so would policy groups. Now, policy group funders might want a law passed, which would be a violation of their C3 stat, But okay. So this is another version of the same question. Yeah. if it's too difficult to reconcile, mission, finances, and leadership, should there be a reversion, one of those that trumps, or what do I'm assuming now that we got to hypothetically have an organization back on its heels where these are in conflict with each other.
Yeah.
Should there be a rebuttable presumption that one of those is more important or trumps? That's another version of the same question. But
yeah, so I always come back to impact. I mean, that's why these organizations exist. That's their value proposition. And so to me, it is, you've got to start there. Now, if there is the tension, why, right? If it's on the leadership or people side, are you really serving people's needs? Are you listening to them? What voices do you have? If it's on the financial side, same sort of things. What's the rub? What can you learn as to why your impact isn't resonating? But we exist to strengthen and build better communities. Therefore, that needs to be the lead.
And that might be at the expense of strengthening the sustainability of one particular nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So sometimes people will fret about, gnash their teeth about the death of the founder and what's going to happen to the nonprofit he, she, they founded. Mm-hmm. Is that the end of the world? What's so bad about that? Another one will arise. I mean, you've written books about sustainability. I assume there's a desire to have it outlast the founder, but why?
I mean, I think they're there's so much wrapped up in that question around legacy and all those sort of pieces. Look, I think that, like any company, I think the life cycle of a nonprofit waxes and wanes. And I really, look, there's a lot of people out there that will say there are too many nonprofits. We need to shrink the number of nonprofits and stuff. I want to give the flip side of that. The more nonprofits there are, the more people there are engaged and committed to strengthening their communities. And I don't think that's a bad thing. So, I think that things will come and go. And the question is, what's the impact you're really having? And that boards need to really think about that question. What's the need in our community? What's the impact that we want to have? Do we have the skills to deliver on that? And is there alignment across those things? If there isn't, then somebody better can take over from there.
Yeah. The observation about there being too many nonprofits might often be made by funders who want efficiency. And I'm going to interpret what you just said as you're okay with competition among nonprofits.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, look, define it. Figure out where you can collaborate, figure out where you can compete. And if you can't deliver that impact as efficiently and as effectively as someone else, then for this betterment of our community, they should actually get the grant from the foundation.
Yeah. Okay.
I know that's hard to say, but.
Yeah. I'm trying to get you to break a lot of plates or whatever. Break the chain. All right. So just going big picture, Steve, what is I guess you have to sort of say, in the current circumstance, post-COVID, what is the current state of nonprofitdom, nonprofits with which you're familiar? Back on their heels, or what's the state of the?
I would say the key word, like all the rest of us, is uncertainty. The secret is nonprofits actually did really well during COVID because of government funding. Yeah. And, so most of the organizations that we're working with are actually in a pretty good financial position. I think the question is, what's going to happen moving forward? I will say, I think as a sector, we have some even bigger issues. When you look at trust in the nonprofit sector continues to fall. I mean, yes, it's high relative to others, but 56% is not high. And the number of households donating has fallen, and so that's down. Those to me are bigger questions for this sector right now that frankly were trending long before COVID.
Yeah. Same question, but narrower. What's the current state of philanthropy in particular which I know is those are nonprofits.
Mhm.
But we're the giving reviews. So we try to pay attention to that part of the world,
Mhm.
sector of the space. What's going on? What's the state of philanthropy? And I guess I'll even, I mean, when I ask that, foundations, but
Mhm.
do you have any opinions you'd like to offer on that?
I mean, I think that I wish I knew is I guess really the answer.
Well, that's another version of you saying uncertainty, or
Yeah.
as regards, and yeah, okay.
I mean, I think it's really, I think we're seeing some changes in philanthropy right now. So are we seeing less prescriptive, less, top down giving? We did during the pandemic, but I'm already seeing some of that start to snap back. So, I mean, I don't truly know. I think the important piece is there's been a realization that's been healthy that oftentimes people in foundations in particular are farther away from the constituents that nonprofits are trying to serve. And so do they really understand and know what those people, quote unquote, need? And so, my thing is how do you get resources to the people in the community who actually know firsthand kind of what their potential solutions would be? And whether foundations do that going forward is, I think, anyone's guess.
Sounds like you might be skeptical they will.
I think I am, because I think they're feeling pressure. They feel pressure to report to their boards on what are the measurable outcomes. So, then you start prescribing.
Do you think the polarization, this can apply to either nonprofitdom overall or philanthropy in particular, is what you were just talking about maybe a function, a byproduct, unfortunate, of the polarization, well, one of America, but two, regarding public affairs in particular, or are they separate problems?
It's all one problem.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think if we had the answer how to solve intergenerational poverty, hopefully we would have, been able to fund some of those things right now. But I mean, this is about, we joked about iteration. This is about an iterative process of, does this work or does this not? And as soon as you start throwing out ideas, it becomes political, and it becomes, the polarization really raises its head.
Yeah. Well, why don't we end it there? Steve Zimmerman, thanks so much for doing this. Nonprofit management consultant at Spectrum Nonprofit Services in Milwaukee, and an author of several helpful books on sustainability and nonprofits in general.
Thanks for having me.